Hello, this is Francois Menard of Puller Technologies, and today I'm being asked to tell my story as an entrepreneur and as an inventor and the career that I've had and what has led me to start Puller Technologies and ultimately the invention of the helical grip and the products that are going to be in the hands of thousands of installers across the world to make cable pulling now easy and fast. And I'm happy and honored to present this to you. It's going to be a half hour, so bear with me. And if you're interested in the topic of telecommunications, you'll learn a few things along the way, hopefully. So let me get started. So very early in my career, I started an ISP. I'm now 49, just close up being 50 years old, and that was in the days where dial-up modems were still being used and internet access at high speed was not really there. I mean, high speed at the time was 28,800 bits per second, and we were able to download really fast then. So, of course, now it's 10 gigabits per second, and that's the baseline that we're comparing things against. And so let's be clear, it's 10 billion bits per second versus 28,000 bits per second. It's quite a big drastic increase in speed, and now everybody expects to get 6.44 gigabits per second out of their Wi-Fi access points, and things have changed. So now that basically means we need fiber optics. Fiber optics is really the only way to bring the speed required for the next generation of Wi-Fi at a certain distance, because category 5, even if you have the most fancy category 8, which can do 25 gigabits per second, that will only do it over 30 meters. Versus fiber optics, you'll be able to do 10 gigabits per second over 20 kilometers with very inexpensive optics. So it's really not fair for unshielded twisted pair and even shielded twisted pair cable. And well, the world's changed. So now we got to worry about bringing fiber to a Wi-Fi access point at the same time as power. And we can talk about that later. But for now, what's important to understand is when you're pulling fiber, you may not be equipped to test and install the connector at the end of the optical fiber. And that is more or less true these days with category 8 at 25 gigabits per second, when the test tool that certifies that the connector is well installed is what, $12,000. So the future of unshielded twisted pair is the present of optical fiber, and that means pre-terminated cables are going to be used ever more so popularly. And in order to pull on pre-terminated cables, this is where the Puller story all got started. Witnessing one too many installs of fiber to the home where the installer was not willing to pull the cable through a hole in the wall for not having a tool to pull on the patch cable with a connector on it. And the kind of connector we have on these patch cables is an SCAPC connector. And you might imagine that if you're using the tool that everybody knows, this 95 years old Kellen's grip, which is sort of a retractable and endless woven mesh of wires. Some people call it a Chinese finger, some people call it a sock, but it's not really a sock, it's really a grip. Anyways, if you don't have the right matching size of the grip of the connector, it's not gripping. And if you use too small of a Kellen's grip, well, you can't fit it above the connector. And then trying removing the dust cap out of it will take a while. So let's imagine now that you're going to do what I'm going to show you, that is popping the outer body off of an SCAPC connector and putting the Kellen's grip on it. This is a joke. You don't want to do that, because if you actually pull you're going to rip the connector out of the patch cable. And that's really not the right way to do it. And plus it's super hard to take off at the end. And the real problem with the Kellen's grip is that its squeeze point is, see how hard it is to take off? I'm going to finally get it off. Okay, so the squeeze point of the Kellen's grip is right here, and it's going to squeeze right on the head of the connector. So we saw that there existed aramid-based Kellen's grip, and this is for dielectric pulling in rusty saltwater environment where the metal Kellen's grip will rust, and so we use these all rigging and stuff like that. And we wanted to make it super small and basically allow for a Kellen's grip that would be able to fly over the connector and not apply pressure on it, and then attach to the cable sheet, and then allowing to pull the patch cable without ripping the connector off. So we were not successful in developing this solution using a miniaturized version of a Kellen's grip. And the idea was given to us to make it a plastic part. And the idea of making it in plastic was completely new. It was December 15th, 2021 when this idea was given to us. And it's not even a year out. And we were able to iterate on this idea of making it in plastic and turn it into a real business with 20 different products and several patents being filed for it this time. And courtesy of learning the art of making computer chips and integrated optics, which I've done over the last 10 years, we were able to get the wheels going on additive manufacturing and get these products engineered real fast. But the story does not end at this part. I'll show you what's the evolution of it and why it's so relevant. But anyways, that's generation 1, and it's the longitudinal grip. And you'll find that if you look at the logo of Puller Technologies and the U shape of the Puller logo, it's exactly the end of the U of the longitudinal grip. And the way it works is you take an SC connector, you slide it in, then you'll hear it, it snaps. And because it snaps, it grips. It does not grip that hard, but it grips good enough to do some lightweight pulling. So you take a pulling stick and you screw it to the end of the puller, and you take your portable wall and you're able to pull it through. If it's a lightweight pull, it's going to work. And we thought that was going to be the end of it, and we started to make it so that we would be able to do it with even smaller holes in the wall and do it with an injection molded part. And so that's what the Puller Slim is. It's an injection molded part that weighs less than a gram. It's super inexpensive to make. And the way it works is you pop the outer body on the DC connector, you mount it in the adapter, it snaps, you take your pulling stick, and now you're pulling through much smaller diameter holes, such as this 10 millimeter future pack conduit from Durline. And so this plastic adapter is allowing to make it so inexpensive that it could be mounted on a patch cable right in the bag, so that when you take the patch cable out of the bag, it's ready to pull. That so happens to be our website for taking orders, and it's readytopull.com. but it's really dedicated only for the punching of the twisted pair products, whereas the fiber optic products is already under distribution and available, and you're welcome to inquire through the distribution channels to get the fiber optic products. So let me expand on that. So that was the Ray and Trent U-clamp, and because it's not a 180-degree U, it's a tighter opening at the top. When you press the cable into it, it snaps and it keeps the cable in place. So we were able to secure some IP, intellectual property, around this concept, but we were not ultimately satisfied of this being a sufficient grip to make it a tool that would be able to withstand use in heavy-duty cable pulling environments. And so we did not really know what to do, but somebody brought to us a use case that we did not anticipate originally at the time, which was that certain service providers were using much smaller diameter patch cables, and those patch cables are mushy and they don't clamp in the U-shape. So we couldn't really make a Ray and Trent U-clamp that would be able to clamp on these cables because they're too mushy. So we came up with, I think, a pretty interesting idea, which was taking the outer body off and then using this helical pulling device and wrapping the cable into the helical pulling device core, and then insert the patch cable and then snap the helical part in the U shape, and this would allow to pull on the cable. Again, nice idea, limited grip force, but we had that in the bank, and we took it this far, and we applied for an interesting program from Cable Installation and Maintenance Magazine, and that was circa June-ish timeframe, and we started to write an article which got accepted for publication in Big CICT Today. So at Big C File 2022, if you turn to page 24, you'll be able to read about cable pulling adapters, including our wonderful picture of a calendar drip on a patch cable, which is really a bad idea, and we explained why. And this helical pulling adapter is described, but this is where we left things circa June to 2022 when we sent it for publication. And we kept iterating over the course of the summer and longing for a solution that would provide even more grip force and would be easier to use. And we're really proud to say that we've nailed it. We're now in October, and this is now being used in real life by real installers doing installs of fiber to the home, and they're happy about using the tool. And let me show you what it is. It's the Puller FTTH kit, which is sold in a convenient package with 2 pulling sticks, and I'll explain to you why these pulling sticks are there, but they're really not meant to be replacing the real ones that you should be all having, but they're necessary and sufficient to do just a simple through-the-wall pull. If you really want to get to a real pull operation, you're going to be using your lumber sticks. So in the kit, you open it up and you find that you have 2 devices. Let me show you what they are. We call them Helipullers, and it's really the same concept as our little blue helical pulling adapter that we've essentially repackaged into the entire tail of the pulling device. So if you take a patch cable and you pop the outer body, you're able to insert it into the slim version and go through a very small hole. And if you don't do it and you use the outer body on the connector, you're able to take it into the device, which has the bigger outer diameter, and then you do the whirling or turning it into the helical groove, and then it snaps, much like the longitudinal clamp, but it's really retained in a helical fashion. And so in this fashion, the cable is forced into a curly configuration, and when you're pulling on the plastic part, the counter pressure of the cable wanting to straighten itself finds itself frustrated from being able to come back straight, and so it causes the friction to be maintained inside the helical groove, and this great pulling force to be applied, which is in the very least 3 times bigger than our longitudinal clamp. So you can screw the pulling stick to the head of the device, and again you take your wall and you're able to get it through. Even though it's tight, you're able to pull it through. So, but that, as you've seen, is not as optimal as what it could be. You see, if you were to pop the outer body, and this is where it gets to be interesting, because certain SC connectors are not as easy to pop the outer body off of the SC connectors as others. So this is an NTT style SC connector, and when you pop the outer body off for the first time, you have to push against the table and push hard, and then it will pop off. This is completely different from other SC connectors, which have been deliberately engineered to make it easy to pop off the outer body. And this is a pre-terminated cable from Optical Fiber Solutions, and it has an SC outer body that you can just easily remove. And one interesting thing about it is you can place it back 90 degrees and you can place it back 180 degrees, but beware, this is an SC terminated ferrule, and it has an angle on it. So if you don't align the alignment pin at the top with the little black mark at the top of the connector, and you don't align that against that, you're going to misalign the connector and the APC angle. And so if you were to place it the other way around, then you'd be potentially causing 2 ferrules to mate with opposite APC angles, and that would be bad. So anyways, we think that it could be improved, and there could be a way to prevent this from being put backwards this way, but it still is very fun to use because you don't have to fight this hard to pop off the outer body. So once you do that, you pop off the outer body, whether you do it on this connector or the NTT style connector, you're able to take the slim Helipuller and insert the 4.8 millimeter cable into the slim Helipuller, and then basically wind it into the helical grip and get the grip force. And that's an indoor cable, or an outdoor-indoor cable. You do the same. You insert it in, it's still a 4.8 millimeter cable, and you wind it into the helical grip, and you attach, let's say this time you're going to be doing a nice wrestling match or a pull job, and you're going to get a really long pulling stick, and have about 2 of them attached to one another, and you're going to be steering that cable through the overhead ceiling and bring it right into the living room. So you're going to take your pulling stick, all right, and attach it to the puller. Those pulling sticks are M5 by 0.8 millimeter threaded, and you can take your portable wall again and really form an interesting profile. So there it goes. You pull, and you get to the fiber optic connector, and you pull, and you've gotten it through. So you can steer this around and bounce it across the overhead ceiling tiles, and once you get to the other end, you can climb up behind a wall and get through a wall plate. But in the end, what you end up doing is you end up bringing that pre-terminated SC connector into the modem. And just before connecting it to the modem, you look for the alignment pivot up, you place it back, you remove the dust cap, clean it off, and plug it into the modem, and you've completed fiber to the home install, bringing the outdoor demarcation right into the living room where you're going to be installing that fancy fiber to the home ONU, or ONT, optical networking terminal, or optical networking unit, which is supposed to be saturating your gigabit internet connection. So if you don't have a gigabit of wireless speed and you do a speed test, a lot of people complain that you're not getting what you're paying for. So it's always important that the Wi-Fi speed be faster than the speed that the fiber to the home service offers. And that's why the operators invest a lot of money into supplying their customers with ONUs with the latest generation Wi-Fi. And those routers have multiple antennas, multiple inputs, multiple outputs, antennas. And they really need to be dead center of the living area, as opposed to bottom left corner of the house next to the electrical panel, where you'll be providing Wi-Fi service to your neighbor more than you'll be providing the fastest possible Wi-Fi throughout where you're actually living inside your home. So bottom line is bringing the fiber all the way to the ONT location is super important. And this is being done these days with 4.8 millimeter cables. But 4.8 millimeter cables is not the end of the equation here, because there are certain cases where the ONT is a satellite unit from the residential gateway is a satellite unit from the ONT, and there is actually a need to run a twisted pair cable. And many people will do that with a box of twisted pair cable that's unterminated, and then start doing the RJ45 termination in the field, and that's well known. And in order, when you do this, you can use our UTP pulling device, which is allowing to pull raw Cat6 cables with no electrical tape, much in the same way as you'd be pulling on optical fiber. It's just that the head here is not for connectors. There's no head, so you just basically wind the cable into the helical grip, and you're able to pull in the UTP cable and do your RJ45 termination. But if you do buy RJ45 that's pre-terminated, which is now an option, you can use the RJ45 pullers, and there's a big cavity in this case. This is the 9 millimeter one for Cat8, so there's a smaller one for Cat5. That's part of our UTP series of products. You can check it out. Interesting factoid, you can actually pull on other kinds of cables with the helical grip, and this is RJ6 for satellites or cable modems for the cable industry. It's a nice tidbit. And while we're at it, let's talk about the cool stuff that's being used now for pulling cables in multi-dwelling units to do fiber to the home installations in apartment buildings. And of course, for that, we were asked to develop another product, which is we call it the superhuman device, because when you have that, it's as if you have like 6 arms. Just kidding. It's the inline helipuller with 2 helical grooves of 3 millimeters. and I'll just show it to you very quickly. It allows for 2 cables to start the daisy chain, and then cable number 2 pulls cable number 3, and cable number 3 pulls cable number 4, and cable number 4 pulls cables number 5. And what you do is you assemble this tree in the comm room in the basement from 5 different boxes, and you get that up the riser, and as you get through the first floor apartment building, you pull the entire chain out, and then you pop the last puller device, the last Helipuller, and you drop the shortest cable, and then you've wired up the first floor apartment, and then you reintegrate the entire remaining chain, daisy chain, into the riser, and then you get to the second floor, and then you pop the before last device, which is now the last device, and the second shortest cable, and you've wired the second floor apartment. And you do so until you get to the last floor, and you've brought fiber all the way to the top floor of the building, and you've brought fiber into all these apartments. Another approach where you'd be able to do this would be with 4.8 millimeter cables, and that's a completely different approach. Different tool. We call it the Hexa Helipuller, and it has an interesting configuration. It has 6 longitudinal clamps, like on this device, but a helical grip, which is not meant to wind the cable into, but actually wind the aramid of all cables into. And so when you strip the cables down to the aramid and you wind the aramid into the helical groove, what you end up doing is you're able to pull on the cable by the sheet and the aramid at the same time. And that is an interesting solution because it avoids the possibility of stretching cables, which is a real possibility when you're pulling hard on 4.8 millimeter cables only by the sheath. And we have evidence of that, and this product is now being evaluated by some operators which are considering systematic use of this approach to pulling cables to make it super easy for people to pull on cable by the sheet and the aramid at the same time. So I know I've been talking about the pre-terminated cable pulling, and I've been also talking about puller getting into bare cable pulling of all sorts, and now bare cable pulling, multiple bare cable pullings by the sheet and the aramid. So you might imagine, where are we going next? Well, it's not really difficult to imagine where we'd be able to be going next. Let's talk about the data center space, where you might be getting these very long direct attached cables, which have multi-mode fiber and transceiver heads all attached to one another. And as you wind these cables into your data center, you don't really want to damage the head, and there's no tool to really pull on this. So imagine that you'd be essentially extending the length of the Cat5 puller, and you'd be able to insert the transceiver head of the direct attached cable into it, and then wind up the cable into the helical grip. You'd be able to pull on direct attached cables inside a data center through a rack from the front of the rack to the back of the rack, or between 2 racks as a cross connect, and do so without damaging the connectors. And it's really a substitute for a dust cap, and a much more interesting dust cap, one that actually serves the purpose of protecting the connector throughout the pulling. So we think that our wonderful Cabling Innovations Award is really only which we got for our first generation product, and which really signified a marked improvement in the art of cable pulling, is really just our starting point. We now have all sorts of new products based on the helical groove, which are truly useful and truly time savers, and allow people to pull on cables without electrical tape. And I have personally, I have a friend who's handicapped and who's in the security business, and he was born with only one arm, and he was telling me, "Hey, Francois, you know how difficult it is to put electrical tape when you're like me, and you have to use your teeth and your toes, and it's super hard, and if not anything, aside from reducing the quantity of electrical tape that goes to the trash every day when you're a cable installer, everybody will appreciate that. Putting electrical tape around cables is not fun. It's tiresome, it takes time to put on, it takes time to remove, especially if it gets stuck, and it does get stuck, and then it's even harder to remove when it does get partially scratched on the side. So pulling devices which enable you to do your pulling operations without using electrical tape do save you time. You can pay for the tools out of the savings from paying for electrical tape, and the tool pays for itself because it's reusable over and over multiple installs, and last but not least, it's affordable. It's like super affordable. It's noise in your financials, guaranteed. And these tools are made in plastic, and they're made in plastic for the reason of that was a deliberate choice to find a solution that could be made in plastic, because it would be super affordable. And I think that people appreciate the tools for what they are, which are true useful tools that are truly innovative, and it keeps us going. And we really want to innovate and partner with all of the installers across the world to improve their daily operations, and even develop products for pulling, like on HDMI cables and for AV, or even professional audio, or all sorts of data center applications, or MPO, or even figure 8 cables, or duplex cables, or flat drops with rectangular shapes. Our ability to manufacture multiple devices is really demonstrated by now, and we're truly agile. And it's really for the industry to challenge us to provide new innovation, and guaranteed to all of you that may have a cool idea. We have a partnership program for people who are willing to submit their ideas and help help us industrialize and bring them to market. So just reach out, and we're fair, and it's all about saving time for people and making it easy and fast to pull on cables from now on. And you can count on Polar Technologies to be out there to supply these products. Request them from your distributors. There are existing distributors in place for the fiber market, such as Connect Telecom Solutions in Waterloo, Ontario, who have been working with us in the Canadian market for the last few months, and it's starting to bear fruit in the Canadian market. We've launched into the US in September. We're going to be at the Fiber to the Home show, FBA, Fiber Broadband Association, in August in Florida, and taking these products on the road. And just reach out. And again, thank you very much for watching this video. I know it was a long video, but hopefully you've seen where we're coming from and where we're going, and you'll appreciate Polar Technologies for the value it's bringing to the market and to your bottom line. So thanks again, and we'll see you soon.